What if the future of finance wasn't being written in spreadsheets or boardrooms, but on the stages and in the corridors of one event in Amsterdam? Well, today I'm going to be joined by the Chief Strategy and Growth Officer at Money20, and she's providing us with a front row view of the real conversations that are going to be shaping financial services this year and beyond. From AI agents getting their own credit cards to stable coins doing to banks what the internet did to telcos, there are so many big trends at the moment that aren't just disrupting finance. They're redefining its very foundations. So if you've not heard of it, Money20 Europe isn't your typical fintech gathering. It's a place where alliances are made, bold ideas take shape, and the future is negotiated in real time. So my guest is going to share what's happening behind the scenes of over 8,000 leaders across banking, payments, tech, regulation and policy as they all converge. And we'll discuss whether collaboration between fintechs and banks is peaking or just beginning, and what the UK's post-Brexit freedom might actually unlock, and how Europe is indeed also positioning itself on the global fintech stage. So, what happens when traditional finance, decentralised innovation and AI all collide under the same roof? Well, it's time to find out as I officially introduce you to today's guest. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Scarlett. For everyone listening, hearing about you for the first time, can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. Well, I am so honored to be here, Neil. We were talking offline, just the depth and breadth of amazing speakers you've had on this podcast is really incredible. So I'm so happy and honored to be included in that list. I am Scarlett Sieber. I am the Chief Strategy and Growth Officer here at Money20 globally. But what that really means is I run our product. I have a very bit of a unique background. I actually started off as a recovering entrepreneur turned banker for a decade, and now run in partnership with our president, Tracy Davies, the largest independent global platform and shows for fintech. So here's where we're at today.
Well, a big thank you for taking the time out to sit down with me and share your story today, because you've got to be incredibly busy right now in the run up to a big event. So let's start with a big picture. For those unfamiliar with Money20 Europe, how would you describe its role in shaping the future of finance and why it matters more than ever?
Absolutely. So Money20 is that global platform that I mentioned, but we have shows all over the world. The one that's coming up most recently, or coming up right now, is Money20 Europe. And that show has been on the continent now for almost a decade. It's really exciting. We're getting up to our 10-year anniversary, which we are just absolutely thrilled about. And the thing that is so unique about us is the show has 8,000 plus people, but the audience is extremely senior, 35% plus C-suite. Financial services, because you have guests from all different sectors, all different industries. The thing about financial services, you also, I've seen had a lot of health on there, is really about the complexity of the regulatory environment of finance. It's not surprising. Think about the things that people are most shy or connected to is their health and their wealth. So really what Money20 in Europe in specific does is enables that industry to come together and think about the future. So if you think about, you're sitting on across the pond for me. And you think about some of the biggest names that the most people would know. You think of a Stripe, a Klarna, even a Spotify, right? So that's not a fintech, but the Spotify team is always out at the show. People like the CEO of Stripe, people like the CEO of Klarna started almost a decade ago when Money20 first started on the continent. And they were early startups telling the story about Klarna, telling the story about Stripe. And that is really what we do, is we are the platform that helps to basically shape the future of an industry. So you figure out the next latest, greatest news, you figure out what's happening. There's a lot of debates, a lot of opinions, and it's a really great experience.
And there is so much excitement in this space at the moment. We're seeing a wave of partnerships between traditional banks and fintech providers. As we record this episode today, Bitcoin has reached 110,000. I think it's an all-time high. JP Morgan, they've made a few noises about making a U-turn on how they saw Bitcoin. So do you think we're going to see more of this collaborative phase? Will it last, or are banks already planning to bring services back in-house? Because there's so much going on right now, isn't there?
There really is. And, Neil, this is a question that for me is as old as time because, I said I was a recovering entrepreneur, which I am. I had a data visualization platform, not in fintech, but for a decade I was in banking. And this exact conversation of collaboration, competition, how do these play out has been front and center. I'm glad that you brought up the Bitcoin piece. I do get that on my Alexa every morning of Bitcoin is at an all-time high. Bitcoin is at an all-time low. It's like, okay, oh my gosh, my head is spinning from the back and forth on that one. But even thinking about the underlying technology of that with blockchain, literally a decade ago when I was a banking exec, I was sitting there and those earlier consortiums were being built. And it was such a new and unique thing for banks to be working together on something, whereas before they were always competitors. So as it relates to bank and fintech, I think we are definitely in the golden era of that collaboration. We'll see where it goes from here. I mean, not surprisingly, especially when you go down the tail a bit, there are still a lot of traditional financial services that do see fintechs more as competition than as opportunities. And there are banks that are already thinking about reabsorbing some of those services that they've currently outsourced to fintechs. So we'll see what the next phase that could look like. But I do think there is a chance that could happen. But I feel pretty strongly that the fintech bank partnership is here to stay. It just will evolve on exactly what that partnership looks like.
And on this side of the pond, 3,200 miles away from where you're sitting here, the UK government is also using a post-Brexit regulatory freedom that they've found to support innovation in digital finance. And I'm curious, from your vantage point here, do you think this creates a real competitive edge, or are we just still waiting for policy to catch up with technology? How do you see this?
I love this question on policy catching up with technology because, again, because of the complexity and the importance of regulation in our industry, it is always front and center. So the UK really has a chance to lead on this, but it's not about the strategy and vision. It is about the execution. So how is it going to be executed? That really matters. The regulatory freedom is allowing autonomy and opportunities for space for innovation. But the hard part, and we've seen this a lot going, across upon the other way, is when the industry is leading and the government and regulation has to follow, that causes some type of challenges. So policy really needs to be keeping up with the pace of technology. And I mean, there is a shot that post-Brexit that the UK government really does hone in on the speed of innovation and take that as a unique advantage and make strides forwards. But what they would really need to be thinking about and do is inherently need to move faster and create larger outcomes for the EU as a whole. That's going to be pretty challenging. I am only half European. Clearly, I don't have the European accent because I was born in the US, but it's something that is part of the conversation all the time. And if we talked a little bit about Bitcoin earlier, but as stablecoin legislation is on the verge of being passed through Congress in the US, especially the Genius Act, which is going to allow banks to issue stablecoins. You mentioned JPM a second ago. You could really imagine a world where the UK could similarly do something interesting in this space of intersection of traditional finance and decentralized finance that could give them a big step up. So the question is, what does that look like?
And I'm so glad you mentioned stable coins there, because so many people getting alerts on their phones about BTC all-time high, getting those alerts. Just need that napalm death song that I think it was an episode of Silicon Valley had, that every time it hit that all-time high. But if we take a step away from all that hype and stuff there, stable coins are the ones that are shifting the ground beneath traditional cross-border payments. So how do you see that continue to evolve, especially as regulators race to keep up and global alignment becomes more important?
I try to think about things, I don't know, Reddit. You talked about some of the other ones. Like sometimes my husband is obsessed with Reddit. So it's like the ELI5, like explain it to me like I'm 5. Yeah. So that's how I try to take some of these more complex topics and think about it. So for me, when I think about the role of stablecoins are doing to cross-border payments what the internet did to telecoms is kind of how I think about it. The transformation is happening fast, but the real kind of bottleneck or challenge here remains about ensuring that the regulation, to our question earlier, keeps up and that aligns globally. So from a UK standpoint, that means crafting rules that support innovation, but doesn't isolate the UK from the global markets. But stablecoins more broadly are going to power so much more than just cross-border payments. That's the first use case and test case, which is a big one. again, in the US, I think there's some real opportunity. Cross-border payments, on the B2B side, it's very great and obvious, and there's huge use cases with that because the volumes are ginormous. I don't even know if that's a real word, but I'm going to say it. And it's a really good starting point. But the use cases can be much, much bigger than that. So if you think about like the settlement layer and the benefits of stablecoin technology there, the back, we talked a little bit earlier about the bank back office and the business back office. And if we can utilize stablecoin to do things like that, it's going to be easier to manage, faster, and also have the real-time data, because what crypto and all these buzzwords are now was what big data was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. But I do think it's the convergence of those and what that will allow us to do. So I don't know. In my perspective, it's very possible that we will not have global alignment from a policy and regulatory perspective for some period of time, just because of how complex it is. But this kind of thinks about the role of global competition. And so we are in a very unique moment in time now. The sands are shifting day in and day out. So it's really about who's going to take that proactive approach and what does that global cooperation look like to get us there.
And one of the reasons why I think the recent rise in Bitcoin caught so many by surprise is because over the last few years, it's been artificial intelligence that's stolen all the headlines from blockchain, crypto, and metaverse. Remember when everyone was going crazy about that too? But AI everywhere in financial services right now is a hot topic too. So with that comes a sharp rise in fraud and risk and all those nasty things. So how are you seeing companies balancing innovation with that growing need for things like data privacy, trust, and security? What are you seeing here?
I think we're going to go, because this is a tech show, right, Neil? Like we're going to go all the buzzword bingos, right? So we can't get through an episode in 2025 without talking about AI. That would just be insane. But I do think there is a real role here, right? So the other side of that is we actually co-published an AI, basically a state of AI report with A Crew Capital back in October that took all publicly sourced data across the world and had a look to see essentially where are we actually, because it's great to talk about AI, but what the F is actually happening here. And if you think about our industry, we tend to be a bit more of the laggers versus the leaders for all the right reasons, back to regulation. However, what the report found was that when it comes to AI adoption, both in front of house and back of house, by the way, that financial services was actually a leader when it came to AI adoption, which was really, really exciting. And for us, when you think about financial services, there's one core word that we talk about a lot, and it goes back to trust and the role that trust plays. And trust really is like the new currency. And the most successful players will be the ones that scale AI while also ensuring that embedded privacy, transparency, and security are absolutely front and center. One of the things that I did just this morning is I was looking at, because I like to look at data a lot. So I was looking at the key things that people were looking for in our agenda. And, that includes our attendees and everything else and what people were searching for. So when you were asking about the fraud, the compliance, and things like that, the banking and payments, not surprising given who we are, we're number one. Crypto, very high up there, Neil. So we got there too. But the other thing is fraud and compliance, because it is about the AI piece, but that in and of itself cannot solve it. It is how are we doing this effectively, smartly? You've got to fight fire with fire. Digital account opening, there was a lot for our world. That was a big thing. And there was a lot of fraud that came back with that. So we had to use new internet tools to solve internet problems. Like this is just what we do. So we have to fight AI with AI fraud and like AI fraud companies. And there's a lot of those that we see. So that's what we see there. I don't think there's any other technology that can really scale with AI fraudsters and scammers other than AI built for good. And we have a lot of those too. So we're excited to see the convergence of those two worlds.
And I think you're right. I'm so sure someone passed a law earlier this year that every tech podcast must mention AI. So we've reached that requirement. But of course, there is growing talk of Europe stepping up on digital regulation and fintech leadership. So from your vantage point in the US, do you see the UK and EU working together to build a competitive financial ecosystem? Or are we still in danger of heading towards a fragmented regulatory future that I don't know, would just ultimately disappoint?
And with that, Neil just drops the virtual mic on the desk and asks me the hardest question of known to man between our two current countries that you and I are both sitting in right now.
Yeah.
Is it possible? Yes, it's possible. Is it likely? I'm not so sure about that one. I mean, regulatory clarity and alignment is, in one country is tough enough. Think about, the headlines from both of our respective countries and what's been going on, not only in the last few months, but the last few years. So building it between a country that just left the established union and that is an interesting layer though. Like, does that give the UK an opportunity to do something new and unique with the US? For sure. I do think that there's, a real opportunity here. What that looks like, how we can go about doing that is a question that people way smarter than me I'm spending a lot of time thinking about. But we certainly hope that, our role in this as an independent kind of third party with it is being the platform where those conversations can happen, where we're bringing people. So, even in Europe in a few weeks, we have the head of the digital pound, Diana Karasuko from the Bank of England coming to talk about this. We have a lot of the big EU and US and other regulators there as well. So there's definitely an opportunity across the board. I think there might be more opportunity UK US than UK EU, but let's see what we can do together, because there's definitely a lot of emotion in this stuff.
And as we have unwittingly stumbled into the complex question quicksand, we'll continue down there. So I'm hearing that the IPO activity is coming back mostly in the US. So do you think the UK can realistically become a more attractive place to go public, or realistically, are our fintech stars destined to list abroad? How do you see here? How do you see this playing out?
Oh boy, there you go. You got it. You got the other big weighted one in there. Listen, I like the tough questions. I think it makes for good conversation. To your point on the IPO thing, it is such a live and constant debate. And, even again, like you were asking me offline about the busiest and most stressful times, it is one of those interesting things, because all of a sudden, and Tina knows, we're all off camera, who is our global head of PR. She's probably smiling because we'll be having a conversation with a company that's, having a huge announcement that they want to make on the stage that's about to go public. Then all of a sudden it doesn't happen. And so there are a lot of ebbs and flows there. Do I think that there is an opportunity for the UK as it relates to IPOs? I certainly do. It goes back to what is the key strategies and what those companies are looking to do. As the independent platform, we have LSEG, we have NYSE, we have all of the platforms in which one goes public that comes to our show and has conversations with us. And I think it really goes back to what the point there is. I mean, as an American, I do know the opportunities of being here, but there is plenty of great ones as well on the EU. I think we have to make sure that even with some of those, exchanges and things like NYSE and things like LSEG and others, it's how they're leveraging and utilizing technology, because again, regardless of where we're at and what industry we're in, the importance of technology sits at the center. And so which ones are utilizing that most effectively to better serve their customers, which in this case, to your question, are the companies that are thinking about IPO.
And if we dare look ahead, we're already 6 months into 2025, already got one eye on 2026. So would you expect to be the defining shift in financial services over the next 12 months, especially based on the kind of conversations that you're having and what you're seeing and hearing at this year's event? What are you seeing here?
Yes. So I'm going to really surprise you on this one, Neil. So hold on to your seat. AI is still going to be around. Okay. So the continued rise of AI, but again, like getting more and more into the nuance of like what is actually working, what are the real life use cases of this, and kind of the graying of the lines between traditional and decentralized finance. The other thing is, we talked about earlier about how a lot of this and the outputs is like the evolution of what was the buzzword 5 years ago around big data, but it is about how do we converge all of these big topics. So what happens when you take two things that we've talked about already? So AI, decentralized finance, when you put those two things together, the power of combining smart contracts, artificial intelligence, there's a lot. You don't have to be an expert in finance to know the combination of those two things is going to fit together really, really well. So I think that is front and center. Again, not surprisingly, fraud and compliance and the components around that as it relates to it. The role of regulation is absolutely important. And I'd say the other thing is a combination of AI and traditional finance. We talked a little bit about that earlier, but the thing is really around how these two worlds come together. Surprised that, financial services have been a little bit ahead when it comes to this. But if you think about someone like Visa, they're working on giving credit cards to AI agents. Like that actually is kind of terrifying, but also pretty amazing. So giving the AI agents a credit card to handle purchases on behalf of a customer, what is that going to look like? How is that going to benefit the customer? What are we doing to guardrail that so that's done safely, but actually allowing the humans to do what they're great at and allowing the technology and the AI to do what it's great at and is making better decisions. Because when Neil goes through his day and has 5 different purchases, one at your coffee shop, one over at lunch, you're going to purchase a flight or whatever else, you shouldn't have to be thinking about which form of currency you're paying with, whether the platform, whether it be cash, card, or this card is for points and I get more points if I use this for my airlines. AI can do that for you. So that should be a benefit for you where you have more money in your pocket at the end of the day. So that's the type of conversations that we're having. Absolutely. We've got some huge, huge speakers on the stage talking about things like this. We've got the CMO of Klarna, obviously leading to some of your other questions. We've got the CTO of Stripe and so many other great ones, the CEO of ING. So it is the convergence of all of these worlds coming together, and we're looking forward to it.
Oh, wow. The CEO of Klarna, based on the news that's coming out at the moment, that should be particularly interesting, right?
Yeah, it's the CMO actually, David, and he has such a unique perspective. So think about the role of a CMO in the world of where Klarna is right now. Seb, the CEO, has spoken at the show before, but we're going to get the CMO's take this time. But yes, it's going to be one to be watched for sure.
Exciting times. And if you thought me asking if the UK and the EU can work together to build a competitive financial ecosystem, or if the UK could realistically become a more attractive place for companies to go public, you ain't seen nothing yet. I always save the hardest question till last. This is the one that people always struggle on. I've got a Spotify playlist. I ask my guests to leave a song. All I'm going to ask is, what would you like to add to that list and why? And guilty pleasures are allowed. Go for it. What are you going to add?
So, oh, geez. Okay, so here's the thing. This is very weird because a lot of people are music people.
Yeah.
And they can really appreciate the nuance of music. I like music, but I have 2 young boys and I work way too much. So I actually don't listen to that much music. So when I do, I am very intentional and it's for a very specific purpose. So typically when I use music, it's to hype me up before going on stage, right? So we get on stage with thousands of people and I don't care who you are in the world, that moment can be a lot. So I need my inner hype crowd to get me there. So I would say there's probably 2 places that I would go. I don't know if either would be appropriate for a public playlist, but I'll give it to you anyways. So one of them is Rick Ross, I'm a Boss, because it just, you need to see it, believe it, just be pumping in your head that like, you got this, you can do this. This is all you, let's go. Because like I said, everyone has self-doubt. And the other one that I like to listen to is not a song particularly, but is Tekashi 6ix9ine, because he just basically screams through all the songs and curses a lot. And it just gets me going and gets me pumped like, all right, like back in the game, let's do this. So I'd say for very specific purposes, right before getting on the stage, those are the type of stuff where it's like self-motivational, but in a very rough, hard way through hip hop, because hip hop is my love. So there you go.
Oh, you had me at cursing and shouting there. So both of those are going to go onto the playlist. It'll be criminal for me not to add them there, but rest assured I will add those. Now, Money 2020 Europe isn't just a fintech conference, it's a barometer of where money, tech and regulation are heading. So anyone listening wanting to find out more information, if they can't attend, how can they listen to some of the keynotes, etc., check out the news that's coming out? Where would you like to point everyone?
Yeah, I think that probably the easiest is just going to our social across, Instagram, LinkedIn, X, etc. It's just Money 2020. We actually don't do any live streaming of the content, but we always will do some key clips. And, it's the TLDR version of here's the key things that happened. And we have some big takeaways. And there'll be a lot of press and media around it as well, because there's some really big announcements happening over those few days.
Well, I will add links to everything, make it nice and easy for people to find you on all those social channels. And from the convergence of AI, identity, and embedded banking to the seismic shifts driven by stable coins and post-Brexit regulatory reform over here, I think our conversation today offered a timely preview of some of the debates and developments that will define this year's event. And I think we covered ground that goes for far beyond the buzzwords that we dropped along the way too. So please, I urge everyone listening to check that out. But just thank you for taking the time away from that busy organising that you're going through at the moment and making sure everything's running smoothly to sit down and share your story. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Neil. It was such a pleasure. Some good laughs, some of the hardest questions that I've been asked, but also some of the most unique. So I'll take it. I'll take it any day. Thank you.
So a huge thank you to Scarlett for giving us a little glimpse into the engine room of Money 2020 Europe. And if you thought fintech was moving fast, what Scarlett laid out today shows that it's not just speeding up. We're entering a phase where the rules are actually being rewritten. Whether it's stable coins transforming settlement, AI reshaping consumer touchpoints, or IPO conversations reigniting across the Atlantic, the next few months could set the tone for years to come. So if you are in the industry and not following what's happening at the Money 2020 Europe, you're already a few steps behind. But the show isn't just where announcements are made, it's also where influence is built and the future is shaped. So please, I'll leave links to all the social channels so you can keep an eye out on what's happening there and the big news coming out of the event, because I think there's going to be some pretty big news stories coming out of that. And then I'll throw the microphone back over to you. What trends do you think will make the biggest impact over the next 12 months? And let me know. This is a dialogue, not a monologue. Email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, LinkedIn, X, Instagram, TikTok, whatever platform you're on, just look for Neil C. Hughes. Nice and easy to find there. But with all that said and done, I'm going to go check out some of that news coming out of Money 2020 Europe. Before that, I'm going to head to that Spotify playlist. Screaming and cursing, that's where you'll find me. Other than that, I'll be back in your podcast feeds bright and early tomorrow morning. Bye for now.